In this video, I'm going to share all about how I teach Shakespeare in our homeschool, and it can start as early as kindergarten all the way up to high school. So if you haven't started Shakespeare yet, or you're just even a little bit curious about how teaching Shakespeare would look like, stick around and watch this video. So this past year, we introduced Shakespeare into our homeschool as well as in our co-ops. We have a co-op that we started on Monday afternoons with a group of students from kindergarten up to grade 7. That's not the age range, that just happened to be the range of students that were in our co-op. All of these kids, besides one family, had never done Shakespeare before. It was a bit of an experiment to see how it would work out, and it turned out amazing. And Shakespeare is a lot easier to do than what you might expect. Now, normally Shakespeare is not done until high school, and they may only ever cover one Shakespeare play. But what we would like to do is start Shakespeare as early as possible and really try to get through all the Shakespeare plays, and even more than once. And so in this video, I'm going to talk about how we've done that, why we've done that. I'll just quickly say that why it's important to study Shakespeare and read his plays is because Shakespeare's writing, his thoughts, his creativity, his plots are really the foundation for almost everything that we see and read out there. Many following books, the plots even in our favorite Victorian writers, in movies, in a lot of things, they are basing their plots and their storylines on Shakespeare's plays. He really is a founder of many of our words in the English language today. There are hundreds of words that have come from his plays that he just invented. He invented words in his plays that have become part of our words and even phrases. For example, green-eyed with envy is something from his play, I believe, Coriolanus, and several other things like that. Our words, if you just look them up, what words came from Shakespeare, you will see that many words he invented. So he's really, a father of many of our English words today. But also there is just fun and beauty, and also a lot of morality that you get to explore through Shakespeare. It really teaches you a sense of right and wrong, that people that do wrong have consequences, and that it also talks about, making good choices. There's a lot of unwise choices in Shakespeare's plays. So they lead to a lot of discussion that you can have that are very clear and distinct lines. The stories are so exaggerated in some senses, extremes where we know there are some times where characters will kill themselves. There's extremes that make it easy to discuss certain moral characters and moral issues, and what it means to have Shakespeare, even though he wrote about some base characters, really wanted to highlight good characteristics, good qualities in people. And so sometimes in order to see the great character in people, you need to highlight them by showing the opposite. And you might say, is Shakespeare appropriate for young children? And in my opinion, first of all, sometimes there are things, topics, or language discussed in Shakespeare that might, yes, be a little bit inappropriate. However, it really gets lost. It's lost to them. It goes over their heads. I've experienced that this past year, where we have read the entire plays, mostly by listening to an audio version. And the words, the ideas are just over their heads. And when they get to an age where it no longer is over their head, then it is appropriate to discuss those things, because there isn't anything really, Shakespeare really did want to highlight good versus evil. And so it is appropriate. You can read really any Shakespeare play with children. There are some that are recommended to begin earlier rather than others, but really any Shakespeare play is appropriate, and you would just, you may not hone in on some of those aspects that you'd rather just kind of gloss over. And if they ask, what does this mean? You can we've just given some very pat answers to explain, what is going on. But we have had an incredible time. Now, it is recommended by Charlotte Mason Curriculum to begin books such as Lamb's Book of Shakespeare, or I picked up E. Nesbit's Beautiful Stories from Shakespeare for Children, something like that in the early years. So really for your kindergarten up to even grade 3, it's recommended to read an adapted version of Shakespeare stories. There are also, I believe, graphic novels of Shakespeare stories, which might be fun to go along and read and see, more a speech bubble approach. We did start reading these at the beginning last year. But then when we decided to have a co-op, and we did have younger, littles in our group as young as 4 and 5, we just included them along with it. And we wondered, well, maybe they're not really going to get it. But for the most part, the bigger storyline, they understood. And so really all age ranges were able to take from Shakespeare and begin to adapt and get used to the language, the very beautiful, richer language. And he has a lot of humor and wit in there that you can start to pick up on the more and more often you read Shakespeare. Now, a great beginner Shakespeare book to start with is what we did, was A Midsummer Night's Dream. It's a fun fairy tale. There's a love story in there. There's a little bit of mischief going on with the fairies. It's a fun little story, funny, there's some funny scenes that happen. Nothing overly dramatic. It is what is considered one of Shakespeare's comedies. And in Shakespeare's stories, he's got 3 kinds. He's got comedies, tragedies, and then he does histories. So in Shakespeare's comedies, they tend to begin on a high. You do like a smiley face. They begin on a high. At the peak of the story, it kind of, some serious things are happening, but then it has a happy ending at the end. In the tragedies, they begin on a low, and then suddenly there's this great high at the peak of the story, and then it crashes down into a tragic ending. But both his comedies and his tragedies have the same moral lessons behind them that he's trying to highlight and show. It's really less about the storyline and more about the characters that he's trying to build and develop and help us learn some great life lessons in them. And then he also does histories where he does a play about Coriolanus, about other important figures throughout history, and you can look up a list of all his plays that he has available. Last year we did A Midsummer Night's Dream, and we also did A Merchant in Venice, which was also a lot of fun. So now let me just tell you, really, how did we teach the class? What does a class in Shakespeare look like? Now, because we had such a range in students, some that were not yet readers and some that were readers, but reading Shakespeare, of course, for any age is going to be quite difficult, even for myself. We listened to an audio version called the Arkangel audio books, and it's a dramatized version, so every voice is dramatized by a different person. So the females have female voices, males, and all different things. So it actually makes it far easier to follow along and interesting. It's like listening to a movie. And there's music in the background and things like that. It was quite fun. But we got the kids to follow along in their little books. So we bought these Folgers guides, which are great. It has the whole entire play. And then they have sections where they will go. So on the right side will be the play. On the left side, line by line, they'll explain certain words, what he means, and defining certain things that they know will be trickier for kids to get. And before each scene, they also will break down what the scene is all about. So you as a teacher could read that scene for them. Sometimes we would do that. Sometimes we would just see if they could get it on their own. So as they're listening to the audio version, they'll follow along in the book. And my daughter found, so she was in grade 4 this past year, she found that much easier because she's listening but also reading along with her eyes, because They are also talking in British accents. And so sometimes it's, easier to see and hear. Like I like to watch TV with captions on. It helps me to absorb everything better. And so she's the same. And so we found that really worked wonderfully to read along. So they would listen for about 15, maybe 20 minutes at the most, usually about 15 minutes. And then afterwards, they would each get a chance to either narrate back what they learned. So I taught nature study in the co-op. Another mom was teaching Shakespeare, and what she would do is she would ask some guided questions to go through the parts of the play that we listened to help the kids recap what they learned. She might then get them to either draw their narration or do a short written narration. Sometimes they would do a scene, a tableau, a human tableau, where they would all stand in and form a picture of a scene from the play. They actually had sometimes we kind of said, okay, this is what we've learned today. This is the basic scene. Now let's just try to ad lib and quickly act it out. And they would act out certain scenes. Sometimes they would have little puppets and act it out with little puppets. But that's sort of how we would recap at the end. And then we would go into our nature study. That really is all that you need to do. And we did each book over about a 12-week period. So we would slowly go through the play and then move on to the next play. And it really worked out beautifully. The goal in learning and reading Shakespeare is just to be exposed to the language, to be exposed to the type of stories, the storyline, to get to know a feeling for it and to love it. We're not trying to burden them down with understanding every single detail, with understanding every single word and knowing exactly what's going on at all times, and the character studies and all these kinds of deeper literary things that you might do with Shakespeare. In the earlier years, up until about middle school, and even into the high school years, you really just want to learn to love Shakespeare, get to know the plays, and really grow in your understanding of how his writing has influenced everything, really, everything around us in writing and in movies and, all the creative arts. So I watched Charlotte Mason tutorial video. It was through, I believe, the Alvieri, and they were just sort of showing how to teach a Shakespeare lesson. And this mom really took the exact same approach, except that in high school, they would sit around reading the play. So she had 3 or 4 boys, and they would each take a part and just read the play together. I've tried that with my daughter. It was a lot of fun. As you're reading, if you're reading multiple parts, you could change hats to display that you're a different character now, put on a mustache or different things like that, and read it through together. And it's just fun. They laughed together. And she didn't make them write narrations. You could discuss it, depending on the day, have some discussion here and there. If you really wanted to, we did one time, even with our younger kids, get them to write out all the characters and what personalities or what characteristics did you think Shakespeare was trying to give to each one? How would you describe them? How do you think Shakespeare was describing each character? List 1 or 2 facts that you know about the character. Were they sneaky? Were they in these kinds of things? And so you could do that as well. Really, the main goal is to learn to love Shakespeare, to understand it even just a little. And the more and more you expose yourself, if you learn to love reading Shakespeare, you'll read it again and again and again as you get older and really have a better grasp the more and more you read it. Even moving from first A Midsummer Night's Dream into A Merchant of Venice, all the kids really grew in their understanding from one play to the next, just in 1 year. At the end of this year, we filmed a video of them acting out the play, really kind of short little snippets of the whole entire play. And it was amazing. It was so much fun. And we are so excited to do Shakespeare again this coming year. This year we are going to be doing, I think we're probably going to, so Charlotte Mason curriculum often will do a play a term. We might stretch it out a little bit more slowly, although we'll see how it goes. We may do the 3rd play, but we're going to be doing Hamlet and The Taming of the Shrew. And we are super excited to do that. I hope that I've answered all the questions that you might have about Shakespeare. If there's anything else that I didn't really talk about, please comment below. I'd be happy to answer your questions. If I really need to have another video to explain things further, I'll do that as well. But I thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.